Welcome to the Upside Podcast, powered by Upside Global and hosted by Julian Blinn, founder and CEO of Upside Global. The Upside Podcast is listened to weekly by over 6,000 sports and tech executives from all sports leagues and teams in the United States and around the world. Julian has been developing technologies for professional sports teams for over 10 years and has worked for major tech companies along with sports tech startups. In each episode, Julian interviews global leaders in sports to share knowledge on emerging technology in the sports industry and how these technologies can help improve the performance of individuals and organizations, both on and off the playing field. And now here's your host, Julian Blinn.
So today we have the honor of interviewing a group of NFL sports performance experts. So guys, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's great to have you back. So just so that people know who you guys are. So first we have Roderick Moore Jr., the coordinator of sports science for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So, and then we have Ted Ratt, who's the director of sports performance for the New Orleans Saints. So again, welcome back to the show. So what I want to do today, there's a number of topics I want to cover. One of them is about team culture, right? So in your experience, what defines a strong team culture in the NFL, and how do you help reinforce that culture through both good times and challenging periods?
You want to kick it off, Rob?
Yeah, I'll kick it off. I think with culture here, especially with Coach Tomlin, he does a great job with establishing it, and managing and messaging it. And so one of his favorite quotes is "standard is a standard." And so when we begin off season, our meetings are very, tactical, technical, however you want to describe it, but he lists the expectations for the team, how we practice, how we address games, and then it progresses once we get into camp. Same message is repeated, but then now when in season, that same message is repeated, but now it's more consistent toward our in-season opponents. And so, during tough times, during challenging times, the one thing we have, in addition to Coach Tomlin, who's been here, for 18 plus years, is also a great leadership team as far as our athletes, our captains. And so they're another aspect of relaying and also repeating the message, enforcing that message. And then all we do, especially from a sports performance standpoint, we want to reiterate that. Our messaging in the weight room is the same messaging that coach reviews over when we have our team meeting. And so it's always consistent messaging. And then when you go through, good and bad times, for us, last year started off 10-3, then went on a 5-game losing streak. Even though we lost 5 games, going into the playoffs, 4 games, and then the playoff game, it didn't feel like a 5-game losing streak because our message was still the same. So obviously we had to address whatever issues that caused that losing streak. And that's one thing that coach gets in front of, is saying, hey, really, when it all boils down to is the competition of us. It's me versus me, it's us versus us. It doesn't matter really who the competition is, because if we're not on point from what we need to do, whether it's by assignment, alignment, what have you, it won't matter.
So on that standpoint, I'm good friend of Roger Craig, right? Roger Craig in the 49ers. And I remember one time he said to me, what makes the 49ers great when they had like Roger Craig and, Steve
Rice, right.
Right. Is all that during the off season, Roger was like working like in the gym like crazy, right? And then one thing he said to me is like, by the time you get into the second half of the season, like we're in much better shape than anybody else, right? And then, all of a sudden you got like Jerry Rice, those guys just training just like him. So you create that dynamics. So do you have these things where, when you create the team culture, is it during the off season? Is it throughout the year? Or when do you feel like, the bond and this camaraderie just get created?
Yeah, I think it starts in the off season and then it progresses as you go into camp. Camp for us, since we have a destination camp, that really creates a stronger bond because it's just about ball. You're living in dorms, you go to practice, you go to meetings, you go back to the dorms, you hang out. And so there are different events, different activities that are really designed to focus on that bonding, something you cannot measure, what Coach Tomlin likes to say. And so that helps us a lot. And then as we get back to the facility here in the South Side, and then, you get down to your roster cuts, now you have a tighter knit group, and it's still that message that was explained in the spring is now reinforced, reiterated. You've heard it so many times, not only from Coach Tomlin, but also from our captains, that it's ingrained in you.
That's great. Well, thanks you, Roderick. Ted, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, a lot of good points there. And I think the really cool thing to recognize, Julian, is, Rod's at a place where Mike T is one of the most senior head coaches in the league, which is extremely cool. The guy's never had a losing season. I don't think that guy gets enough credit. So, the fact, I'm jealous of you, Rod, because you get to learn from that guy on a daily basis. He just seems incredible. So that's really cool. And then on my side, I have the youngest head coach in the entire NFL. I have Kellen Moore, first-year head coach. I've had that a couple times in my career, whether it's Sean McVay or Adam Gase back in Miami. It's been really cool to see kind of the new kid on the block. And now Sean McVay is one of those senior leader guys. He's on the competition committee and things like that with Mike T. So you see that full circle moment. But I think Rod hit it on the head where it's consistency, and I love the fact that he preached that. That's exactly what Kellen Moore does. The best leaders I've ever been around in sports specifically, but also in business and life, they have consistency. It's almost a superpower. And then I think the other really cool thing to point out is when you look at it, culture is a living and breathing organism, right? It's dynamic, it's fluid, it's constantly changing and evolving, especially in the NFL, in this rapid world that we live in where you blink an eye and fire drills at all times. You're just running around with your head cut off and you're trying to figure things out on the run. But your culture is what you do, right? It's not what you say. It can be words on a building. It could be graphics in a weight room, in a team meeting room. It can be all those things, but you better live with your actions and you better follow through with what you're saying. So keep the message simple, keep it concise, but most importantly, do your actions match what you're saying? And I think that's what we're all trying to do. There's 32 teams around this NFL, and we're all trying to make sure that we're living those habits day by day. You got all the teams that just voted on captains this week. Those are the guys, those are the men that are going to lead the team. And those are the ones that uphold the standard as the standard. The same thing that Rod mentioned. Those are the guys that have to be the standard. You have to be able to look at them. You have to be able to look at the head coach, all those in leadership roles throughout the organization. And you have to be able to see the standards. You have to be able to see the culture living and breathing through those people.
Now, quick question on that. So do you feel like, guys, in the NFL, team culture is even more important than maybe in some other leagues, right? And do you feel like, just take Real Madrid, right? They always talk about the team culture, and there's no player who is more important than the team. Is that kind of the same dynamic in the NFL?
Yeah, I'd say the star of the team is the team. The New Zealand All Blacks. You can go through multiple different sports.
Yep.
But the star of the team is the team, right? You have to put the team ahead of yourself, especially in our sport. We have 69 players with our practice squad. You look at the sheer, we have 70 because we have an international pathway player. So you're dealing with 70 individuals to get everyone in alignment. And then you're dealing with 30 members in the coaching staff, then the front office, the personnel department, the performance staff, the medical staff. There's hundreds of people involved in this thing. You all have to be pushing in the same direction, because if you're not, it's going to crumble really, really fast. And when you get those people that sometimes maybe are doing selfish things, it's really it's going to be an impediment to the team, because ultimately we're all trying to capture that Super Bowl trophy. And if you're not all in alignment, it's going to be really, really hard to do that.
Yeah, totally agree.
Go ahead. Okay.
I totally agree with what Ted said. He hit it on the head with your dynamics, like he said, with the 70. We have the same thing. We have an international pathway player, so we have 70 guys on roster, and so there's 70 different personalities plus the coaches, like he mentioned. The staff, and every year there's turnover in your team. Even during the year, there's trades, there's free agency, there's injuries. So you're bringing guys in every week, try out, not only necessarily to say, hey, I may need to replace somebody, whether it's on the practice squad or what have you, due to injury, but I want to look at an athlete and see how he's moving. We signed a guy last year, had been out a year ago, was coming back from returning from an injury, so we wanted to see how he looked. So we ended up signing him. Then we signed him to the practice squad. Then he ended up this year at another team on their roster. And so, you're always out there seeking, trying to understand the individuals that are available, see if they fit in your culture, because that's the key thing. They've got to fit in your culture. Otherwise, they won't be successful.
Now, before I get to the next question, when you do the training camp, try to build a team culture over the years, can you say, you know what, you kind of feel, you're going to have a good season. And then some other years, you know what, the dynamic is not good. Do you know when you start the season, are you going to have a great season or not? Or is this more complex than that?
That's hard. There's some seasons that you feel like, oh yeah, we're going to do really well, and then you're average. And there's other seasons you're not as confident, but then you end up, having a really, really good team. I think the most successful teams I've been part of, the athletes have said, hey, this team is special, or this team is different. And I think when it comes from the athlete, by them, because everybody has their different experiences, but when the athlete says it and you hear from multiple athletes and they live it, the action, like Ted said, it's more than just words. It's got to be action, has to support those words. And as long as their actions mirror that message and mirror that feeling, then yes, you can tell you have a great or successful team.
Makes sense. Ted, any other comments on that before I jump to the next one?
Yeah, I would agree. I love what Rod talked about too, because the best teams that I've been on, when I reflect back, training camp, I don't know if you necessarily know, because I would say this too, Julian, and you know this, Rod, every week is a micro season. There's so many things that can happen from a Monday to a Sunday game time that it feels like that was the duration of training camp by itself. It feels like a whole month within a week. So I think every week is different, and you're hitting adversity, you're hitting challenges, you're trying to figure things out, and you're really being retroactive, but you have to have that self-critical look so that you can grow. But I think he hit it on the head where the players have to feel it. The closest teams I've been on are the teams that have typically reached Super Bowl level. The Super Bowl teams I've been associated with, those are the ones I can remember vividly, players saying, man, this feels like high school. Like, I'm so close with my teammates. We're so connected. I think you kind of have that, but it's got to naturally develop, and you get everyone on the same page. That connection piece is big, because you got to fight for each other when we're out there. This is hard enough already. You got to be in the corner of your brothers and your sisters and everybody that's associated with this thing.
That makes sense. Now, we talked about adversity a little bit, right? But so when your team is in the middle of a tough losing streak, and we kind of touched on that, but how do you and the organization manage both internal morale and external communication, especially, sometimes with fans and sponsors? I'll give you an example. I was talking to Derek Belender, who's the head strength coach for the Cavs, and sometimes you go through like bad losing streaks. And then, Derek was like, look, one day I said, what? I talked to my colleague and said, do you want me to get you your favorite latte? Like just small things like that, right? To really have those tough conversations, people opens up. And even said like one time, we had a bad losing streak, and some guys just start drinking. And like what's going on here? So, I mean, how do you guys deal with adversity? And how do you, have those conversations?
It's a great question, Julian. I'll jump in. This reminds me of a great quote, Mike Tyson. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. And we're all dealing with adversity in life and sports. Sports is a great microcosm for that, because you're hitting things every day. It could be an injury. It could be, a setback. It could be a fourth down and you don't convert, all those things. It's just microcosms of adversity that are going to come at you in regardless of the form. But then you have to be able to face it, right? You have to be able to commit to the process. What I've found too, Julian, is a lot of it is when you're losing, when you're in the midst of that losing streak, people are more self-critical. They're a little bit more apt to say, what do we need to do? How can I fix it? They're looking inward. Sometimes when you're on the winning streak, that scares me even more, because you can cover up things. You can sweep things under the rug and you can say, it's all good. We still won. You got to be even more critical in those moments, because when you are in the midst of that losing streak, everyone's looking around and trying to be the answer. They're trying to help. Sometimes those winning streaks are just as, if not even more dangerous.
I'd like someone to say, when you're number one, you got to keep training as number two. Otherwise, you might lose it. Right?
Right. And like Ted said, you have to identify, the weaknesses, the issues, because you're right. Winning covers a lot of ills. And so when you're losing, it exposes everything. And just determining what is the root cause of the issue. Is it the same mistake that's repeating itself? Identify that, bring that to the open, and work on that. A lot of times you play the division games. The division games are intimate because you know each other inside and out more than any other team. And so you may lose a division game with an opponent, they play that opponent again 2 weeks later or less than that. So now it's not about the get back. I'm trying to get back because they beat us. It's to get right. So you want to focus on what you need to do to get right in order to now have a greater chance to engineer victory on Sundays or whatever day you're playing. So it's all about just being honest, having an honest assessment, and focus on and controlling what you can control.
Yep, that makes sense. Great insights. Hey, the next one is about leadership councils, right? I was talking yesterday to Darcy Norman, the head of performance for the Chicago Fire, and he said, well, we've got a leadership council. Turns out all the MLS teams do, apparently, or many of them. So does your team utilize leadership councils or player leadership groups? And if so, how do they influence decision makings and the overall locker room environment? I mean, do you guys have do you guys get together maybe every week or every 2 weeks, once a month? I mean, how do you guys do it?
Go ahead, Rob.
With us, we have our captains, and then in addition to the captains, you have those senior type leaders that may not be technically captains, but they are captains because they lead by example. They do what's right. They mirror the message as far as the culture that's within the building. And so with those guys, they'll meet in more of it's more organic, kind of impromptu. If they feel like it needs to be frequently as once a week, yes, we need once a week. If it's only more toward, all right, there's an issue going on, we need to address it or get ahead of it, then that's when we'll meet. So it's nothing really structured on weekly type sessions, but it's something that's very organic that's worked well, here at the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, we're pretty similar, Julian. I think there's a discrepancy between leadership council and the captains. And like I said, we mentioned everyone just voted on captains this week. You typically have this leadership council that, once again, the standard. Those are the guys that are the standard. And then we're having conversations, very open-ended and very honest conversations about, this is way back in the spring. Hey, we go to Seattle this year. We're thinking about leaving early. Here's the why. This is the circadian rhythm adjustment that we're going to try to get from a physiological perspective. Here's why we need your support so that you can communicate to the rest of the locker room. That clear, open, honest, always ongoing, transparent conversation, that's really important. And those leadership council members, those are the ones driving the head coach's message, really the culture. Once again, that word culture, they're driving it, they're living it, and they're breathing it. Those are the guys that you need to communicate with at a really, really elite level, because they're going to drive your message and they're going to have the locker room. They're going to be able to talk to the guys who maybe might not feel comfortable coming to the head coach or coming to myself or Rod and saying, hey, why are we leaving early to Seattle or to LA? Here's the why. So it's really important to get them on your side. But most teams I've been around it, whether it's weekly, bi-weekly, they're meeting consistently with those groups.
That's great. Yeah, it makes sense. Hey, next question is about more like your role, right, in your organization. So from your position as a practitioner, what is the hardest and most overlooked part of your job that outsiders may not even fully appreciate or even understand?
This is a great
It goes back to what Ted has been speaking about, the last few questions, is having those conversations with guys. Yeah. So having those honest, transparent conversations lends you to becoming a psychologist, a sociologist, because there's more than just football that's going on with these guys. They're adults, they have kids, they're married, they're soon to be married, they have girlfriends, they have dogs. And so life takes over and you want to discuss, like, hey, how are you? Not just, hey, how's it going? How are you feeling? Are you hurt or injured? But how are you on the outside? What's going on at home? How's your dog? How's your kid? Those conversations build stronger bonds. So then you have that better relationship, greater relationship, stronger relationship, because this is a league driven by the athletes, and those relationships will assist you, down the line. And so if you can have a great relationship with the athletes and anybody on the staff, that's going to help your team, overall, as far as success and camaraderie.
So I'm like a psychologist, right? All of you guys have to be psychologists.
Absolutely. I mean, you're salesman. You're every career path you could take, you end up doing it. You're a janitor. You're everything.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
A lot of hats. Yeah, Julian. I mean, great answer, Rod. I think the cool part, I've even gotten to the point when younger people coming into the profession are asking, hey, what should I get my master's? I've actually recommended psychology to a number of people because I do think there's a really, really prevalent aspect to our job where that's important. I think the other thing about the role, too, that people might not realize, the hours are crazy. I don't know if people truly grasp. You're making a sacrifice. It's not just you, it's your family. I mean, the amount of birthdays I've missed, the amount of stuff because you're just on the road, you're at a game or whatever the situation is, it's tough. It's hard on the family because the hours and the amount. So when you can get a family-friendly environment, you do family dinner nights at the facility, things like that. Those are important because those are times that you'll never get back. So just making sure work-life balance doesn't exist in this profession. It's an integration. You got to take yourself home and you're bringing work home with you. It's just the nature of the business, and that's a reality. So when you get that really good situation, that's important to note. But I love what Rod said. It's psychology. Everything that we do is predicated on dealing with people. I read constantly. The book I'm reading right now is called Crucial Conversations. We're never good enough at communicating. And I firmly, especially the higher you go, when you're overseeing multiple departments, you're dealing with real world, real people problems. And any problem that maybe one of your staff members, one of your players brings into your office in confidence, that's the most important thing in their life at that moment. So you have to spend quality time with them because it is important. It's important to them. It's important to the human being. And I think keeping that foremost is mind, body, and soul. We're here to train the players, but we're here to be good people too, right? That's how teams are built. And this is once again, a microcosm to life. You get all these people from different backgrounds coming together for a greater good and a common cause. There's nothing more special, man, than getting everybody on the same page and being able to capture and compete for a championship.
Well, and also, you got to be psychology if you have one of your players, younger guy trying to make the team, and you feel like you got no chance to make it. How do you keep those guys motivated? How do you keep them motivated to go to the gym every day? Right?
Find their why. Yeah, I always love this. I'm sure you're the same, Rod, but what drives them? Some guys it's trying to build a house for their mom. Some it's just, hey man, I'm trying to take care of my kids. Whatever that, man, I'm going to lean into that. I'm going to find that, but also it takes time. The psychology, we have to invest in the people. You have to get to know each individual and what drives them and why that's important to them. But man, I'm going to bring that up every day when the stuff gets uncomfortable, when they do hit that adversity. Maybe they have a bad drop in a game. Hey man, come on, what are you going to do about it? Let's focus our efforts towards something we can control, and let's go right back to work.
And sometimes they don't want to talk about it, or they're kind of quiet. Something is off. Like he's not talking. You know what I mean? So.
Yep.
Totally correct. And even, with guys that feel like they don't have an opportunity to say here, just remember every day's an interview, first of all. And then secondly, there are 31 other teams looking at you. They're looking at the film, especially with your preseason games.
Yeah.
Any of that, they are looking and trying to identify the next person they're trying to sign. So there's opportunities regardless. It may not be at your current situation, current team, but there's still opportunities there. And you're in the league for a reason. So
yeah, one of the what? How many guys try to make it to the NFL? Thousands? 1,000? I mean, it's a lot, right? So hey, last question about technology and underrated technologies, right? I was talking to Ryan Peterson from the Bulls the other day, and he said, look, I like simple stuff. They were like cheap, very simple stuff to use with the players. Doesn't have to be complicated. So are there any technologies or tools, whether in performance, recovery, operations, that you believe are undervalued, underutilized in the NFL today?
Go ahead, Rob.
I think everybody knows about the different tools you use from a mechanical load, your GPS, but the physiological load, I think, is still kind of undervalued in many respects because that's the reaction of that mechanical load. And so, with the technology, whether it's heart rate, whether it's GPS, you have to use those both in conjunction with the athlete. But first, before you use it, obviously have that relationships, that transparency, because athletes are very sensitive to that because they want to know, hey, how are you using it? How can it make me better? And is this information being communicated upstairs? And so, if you have that relationship, it's transparent and it's about your longevity, your career longevity, then you'll have more buy-in. And that's what it's got to be about, because you have to have that trust in order to use those tools with the guys and for them to give you that effort, so then you can make firm, sound, scientific decisions based upon that data. Because it's useless if you just testing, collecting data and not using that data, applying that data, and you're just collecting the data, the athletes see that. Or if you're collecting the data and they see, hey, we still have soft tissue injuries, it's not mitigating injuries, then that's a problem. So you want to use it correctly, and then apply it.
Yeah, and that makes sense. Great point. Thanks, Roderick. Ted?
Yeah, great points. I think I love technology, so I'll start with that. But one of the greatest tools I might actually say is a subjective wellness questionnaire, because it's honestly, it gives me context. So once again, you develop the trust, you build the trust, but you ask the simple question, hey, what's your stress level? All right, what's your soreness level? Any indicators, any key soreness points on your body physiologically? All right, great. Let's talk about that. Gives me further context so that I can ask follow-up questions. Hey, what's going on with your right quad? I got hit in the game, got a quad contusion. Okay, well, that's going to inhibit how we're going to squat. Maybe we're going to pattern a different exercise for that day. Those things. That context leads to action, and then that allows us to set that player up, hopefully to be in a more successful environment and situation. So for me, getting the feedback, where they are, how are they sleeping, all those key things. Technology is great. There's 1,000 pieces of technology that are important to our jobs day by day, but that subjective wellness and just asking them, how do you feel? Once again, going back to that human element, that's really critical.
So the funny thing about that, and I talked to many teams about the wellness questionnaire, sometimes the guy's lying, right? I mean, he keeps saying the same answer every single time. Like maybe, so that could be an interesting point too. Why is he lying this time?
Correct.
Right? Something going on.
Yeah,
right?
follow up. Yeah, you're
So-
going to follow up with that player just like you would somebody who flags something. So I'm going to say, hey, what's going on? And maybe that leads to a breakthrough. Maybe that leads to a conversation where the player's dealing with something they didn't necessarily want to, throw it out there and bring it up. But now maybe you're in a position where you can help that player.
Yep, that makes sense. Well, hey guys, we had the end of the podcast today, but always great insights. Yeah, thank you very much for your time on the show. So thank you.
Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for listening. To access past episodes and other research, articles, and analysis of sports technology, please visit our website, theupside.us. Subscribe to the Upside newsletter and receive full access to our sports tech business letter and website. Royalty-free music is provided by ibaudio.com. The Upside podcast provides timely insights and interviews with global leaders in sports technology. Until next time, keep looking to the upside.